Millions fear eviction as U.S. housing crisis worsens. 2 Ezra 15 verse 18. For because of their pride the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, and spoil their goods, because of the lack of bread, and for great tribulation. St. Matthew chapter 24 verse 12. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Shalom, all praises, glories, and honors to Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai Bahashim, Racha Kodash. Double honors to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone who have taught me this truth, as well of men of like mind. Shalom wa chasad, which means peace and mercy to the elect of the nation of Israel, whom you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native American Indians, and Israelite foreigners of the seed line of our forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whom are scattered here in America, which is Babylon the Great, and abroad. To you I say Shalom, and Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushua Ratazah. This lesson is edifying. Millions fear eviction as U.S. housing crisis worsens, by Ken Sweet and Michael Keasley, published yesterday by the AP news outlet. Now it says more than 4 million people say they fear being evicted or foreclosed upon in the coming months, just as 2 studies released Wednesday found that the nation's housing availability and affordability crisis is expected to worsen significantly following the pandemic. Why is that? Because in the coming months, when the government of Esau Edom begins to lift eviction moratoriums, landlords are going to begin to evict their tenants who have, for the past year and a half, been paying no rent. And people are going to start living in the streets, in their cars, in the woods, and eventually is going to come to a point where people are going to start doing things that they usually wouldn't do to survive, such as stealing, murdering, and breaking into those that still have homes in order to eat and survive. That's what the Lord said, that because iniquity, which is sin upon sin, what is sin? Sin, according to 1 John chapter 3 verse 4, is transgression of the law of Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahushua. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And the love of many will indeed wax cold in the evils to come. The word evil means bad time. Eve means time. Ill means bad. It says the studies come as federal eviction moratoriums is set to expire at the end of the month. And not only will tenants be affected by this, but also landlords as well, because landlords depend on their tenants to pay them rent on a monthly basis, so that they can then pay their mortgages to the bank or the city that they bought their property from. And for the past year, the Federal Reserve and other central banks have been buying up all these vacant homes. That's why the housing market as it is right now is in a bubble, because they've pumped trillions upon trillions of dollars into the housing market. That's why things are so expensive. So the banks, they don't care if a landlord is late on his mortgage. And if he can't pay his mortgage, then the property is going to go in foreclosure. And if tenants are living in those properties, they will have no choice but to leave the property unless they would rather face legal actions against them. But the reason to say the studies come as federal eviction moratorium is set to expire at the end of the month. The moratorium has kept many tenants owing back rent housed because after the pandemic began, people started to lose their jobs, some permanently, some temporary. But for the most part, the majority of Americans lost their jobs, and thus they weren't able to work and not only provide food for their families by bringing it on the tables, but also to keep a roof over their heads. And so the government, in its efforts to prevent rapid evictions, imposed eviction moratoriums so that landlords can give tenants a break. But everything comes with a price. To every advantage, there's a disadvantage. And the disadvantage that the people are going to face is imminent eviction once these moratoriums are lifted. Okay, and not only that, but over the past year and a half, people have been receiving, additional money in unemployment benefits. So those that were kicked out or lost their job were able to collect a sufficient amount of money, from the government through, UI in order to not only sustain themselves, but to also, save up some portions to pay their rent. But, our people, the nation of Israel, love to squander their assets through lavish ways of living because they want to have the best of the best. They want to have the luxuries of life. They want to have the lust of the flesh. They want to have the best cars, the best shoes, the best apparel ultimately, to appease, the world. They don't take care of their needs. They really take care of their wants more than they do their needs. And a lot of people are going to pay the price for doing so. But we understand that it is ultimately judgment from Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. So it reads on to say that, making matters worse, the tens of billions of dollars in federal emergency rental assistance that was supposed to solve the problem has not reached most tenants. The housing crisis, the studies found, risks widening the gap between black, so-called Latino, and white households, as well as putting home ownership out of the reach of lower-income Americans, because what they pretty much did was they destroyed the middle class. They only want to keep the poor and the rich, the poor and the wealthy. And they destroyed a lot of mom and pop businesses, small businesses, and a lot of middle class homeowners. It says the reports were released on the same day as Census Bureau's biweekly household poll survey came out. It showed that nearly 4.2 million people nationwide report that it is likely or somewhat likely that they will be evicted or foreclosed upon in the next 2 months. And in the next 2 months, the weather is going to start to become a little bit more hot and then eventually cooler as we approach into, the fall and then in the winter. So-called fall, because that's another season that Esau added, because really you only have the winter, spring, and summer. But anyway, that's another topic for another time. It says many of those tenants are waiting to see what becomes of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention eviction moratorium, which is set to expire June 30th. Housing advocates are pressuring President Joe Biden's administration to extend it. They argue extending it would give states the time to distribute more than $45 billion in rental assistance and protect vulnerable communities from COVID-19. The rental assistance has been slow to reach tenants. because they don't give a F about you niggas, man, about you Israelites. They only care about themselves, and all that money that they've pumped into the economy, really all that money went into the pockets of their own friends amongst the wicked. It says, the latest data confirm two things. Emergency rental assistance is very slow to reach renters in need, and millions of renters remain behind on the rent and at heightened risk of evictions. Diane Yentl, president of the National Low Income Housing Coalition, said in an email. Among those confronting the June 30th deadline is Victor Richardson, the 78-year-old who is disabled and in a wheelchair, is facing eviction from his $2,500 a month assisted living center in Tucson, Arizona. Wow. And there's a court hearing early next month. We have been successfully fighting this, and I've come to believe we are going to come out this victoriously, said Richardson, who housing advocates said would not be admitted to a homeless shelter because of his disability. And if you look at the homeless rate in California, it's incredibly ridiculous. And we are going to see that kind of that level of homelessness across, and not only that level, but even worse across America, Babylon the Great. I'll read just a little bit more and leave the rest in the description box because this is a very lengthy article. Okay. It says the reports by Harvard University and the National Association of Realtors come from different perspectives, but ultimately reach the same conclusion. The United States isn't building enough housing to address population growth, causing record low home availability and rising home prices are putting home ownership out of reach of millions of Americans. Without substantial changes in home building and home affordability, both reports say the result will be a more or less permanent class of renters contrasted with what will likely be a mostly white class of home ownership. See that? Modern day redlining, modern day Jim Crow. While these problems were known before the coronavirus pandemic, the economic impact of the pandemic exacerbated the problem, the report says. Last section, these disparities are likely to persist even as the economy recovers, with many low-income households slow to regain their financial footing and facing possible eviction or foreclosure. Researchers at Joint Centers for Housing Studies at Harvard University wrote. I will leave the rest for you brothers and few sisters out there to read by leaving the article in the description box of this lesson. And Lord's willing, let's get to the scriptures and then conclude the lesson. Again, this is the book of St. Matthew 24, verse 12. It says, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. And the love of many, as we approach the days of Jacob's trouble, will begin to wax colder and colder one against another. We're going to start seeing people doing things out of the norm, things that they usually wouldn't do in order to survive and in order to fend and feed their families and for themselves. We're going to start seeing people breaking into the homes of one another, of the rich, and of those that are so-called still left in the middle class. And we're going to start seeing them, killing each other, raping each other's wives and daughters and killing each other's sons, and a lot of different things in order to survive, man. It's going to become like a free-for-all out here. So things may seem as if they're, going to so-called go back to being so-called normal, as Esau Edom may push it on the news. But in all actuality, sudden destruction is right around the corner. Scripture says that they shall seek peace, and there shall be none. The Lord also said that there is no peace unto the wicked. So this is 2 Ezra chapter 15, verse 18 again and 19, and we're going to close the lesson. For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled. And people are troubled as we speak. They're troubled that they'll soon be evicted when eviction moratoriums are lifted. And then not only that, but also the things that will eventually cause them to despair when they are homeless, the things that they'll have to face being a homeless person. For because of their pride, and no matter what, as concerned the elect, whatever the Lord brings upon his elect, the elect will be delivered, man, no matter what. Because you're going to have brothers and sisters out there that will be on the move, but the Lord will protect his elect. The Lord will provide for his elect. So to you brothers and few sisters out there that's of the hopeful elect, you have none to worry about. Trust in Yahweh Bashmi Yahushai, and keep your head up, keep pushing. We almost out of here. It says, for because of their pride, the cities shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and men shall be afraid. We see men afraid to this day, because the Lord is going to cause these devils, Esau, Edom, to come down having great wrath upon the nation of Israel, because he knew that he had but a short time. It says, a man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword, with a modern day gun, assault rifles, or grenade launchers. That is a modern day sword. And to spoil their goods, take all their goods, all their rations, all their assets, their food, in order to survive. It'll become like the book of Eli out here. It'll also become like the road. I am legend. Because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation. So great tribulation is coming, man. Great despair, sorrow, and death is right around the corner. So with that, I will conclude this lesson, Lord's willing. It was edifying and informative and brief to the point. To the elect, Lord's willing, I say shalom. Till the next, Lord's willing.